And I'm going to admit all. Give everyone a chance just to log in. Now, Dave. So, welcome everybody. Lillian O'Hora here. I'm working with Athletics Ireland currently as the Women in Sport Officer. Today, we're very fortunate to have David Deniefffe involved. Dave, some of you might know him already. He is a member of Gowran Athletic Club. He's a level 2 qualified throws coach. He's also involved in the Kilkenny board. He's the Vice President for Academic Affairs and Registrar at IT Carlow. And his military background has allowed him and enabled him to be able to put certain procedures in place for strategic development. And he's hopefully these life lessons are going to be able to be translated over into year club development and planning. So Dave's club planning program will primarily revolve around the benefits of why every single club should be planning, especially during times like these, pathways for development, and he'll give a sample of development models and potential structures that you might employ to your own clubs. But in the meantime, I have all of you muted at the moment. If you want to ask any questions, you can do so in the chat box, and Dave will answer them at the very end, which I hope is okay. And we will get going. And just to let you all know, this presentation will be recorded, so if you do have to nip in or out at any stage, that's no problem. It'll all be up on YouTube over the next number of days. So like I said, any questions, please refer them to the chat box, and we'll be able to go from there. So over to you, Dave. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Lillian. Much appreciated. Nice kind words to start with. Yeah, as Lillian said, I suppose my background in athletics is reasonably recent. I've been involved in athletics for the last 7-8 years, and very much coming from my involvement with my own children getting into athletics, while I did a bit of discus throwing and running way back when. It's a long time since I competed as an athlete. But that said, I've done a lot of work in the area of club administration and management, coming primarily from my involvement in IT Carlow, where we do a lot of courses in the area. And I've done a lot of work with the GA in particular around the whole area of club development and planning and club leadership. And so, in effect, based on my own experience and working with a couple of people in Gowran AC, Lillian referred to it, we actually went through a club planning process a few years ago, and I had a look across basically what Athletics Ireland had set out for club planning, and I said, look, there's probably a mechanism for basically rolling this out. So we've done an initial exercise on this, and we've rolled it out to a number of counties already. And so I suppose I'm bringing some of that learning from the counties and the clubs that I've had involvement with, and I'll introduce you to what's involved. So I hope you all can see the shared screen, but basically the focus here is why do a club plan? Obviously, you're not going to do a club plan solely on the basis of what you hear from me tonight. Tonight will very much be an introduction to club planning. Typically, it will be followed from with a more detailed workshop. That would typically be at a county level, down into club activities, where you would probably do a similar kind of workshop and work to pull together a plan. And we can talk further about that as we go through. I really believe, and I think it's probably pivotal, I think a club that has a good club plan, has a good idea where it's going, and has a clear strategic focus about where it's going, is a successful club. And I've heard this from many other people saying, well, success comes from competition, from athletes winning medals. But I think success, if you're a successful club, you will have successful athletes. And that's when you look at the big clubs that are around in no matter what sport, they're successful both on and off the field. And that is testament. I think that a club plan will help you work both towards short and longer term goals. It doesn't have to be a big glossy document. It doesn't have to be something that you publish to the world. It's just something that you'd have yourself. And I think that's something, as we go through, we'll talk a lot about the implementation of a club plan also. And then the primary focus of tonight so is very much about introducing the idea of a development pathway for a club plan, how that might work, and then a possible model for how you would develop. I am mindful that in the current AI club manual, there is a discussion around how a club plan might actually work. And that sets out, and again, anyone who's been involved in strategic planning will have come across many of the same tools, stuff like doing SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, or challenges analysis, doing all kinds of analysis, different techniques, and producing plan. But this, I believe, this club plan and the model that's suggested is probably more tailored for what an athletics club or even a sports club would need. So the athletic club planning framework basically starts on the premise of, well, where are you today? Where is your club today? And it's amazing if you said to most clubs, where are you today? A lot of them would struggle to tell you how many members they have, what the breakdown of members is, give you details on what the club has achieved. From that, we normally ask clubs then to say, well, set out your mission, vision, and in a lot of cases, look at your values as well. And there's some really good examples of clubs out there who've done really good approaches to looking at this. I can probably reference some of them. I hope a couple of them are probably here online as well. But clubs like Lusk, for example, have done a really good, if you look at their website, a couple of the UK clubs, some really good examples there of setting out a club vision. Then you would normally set out steps to get there. And then finally, and probably the most important thing, is making it happen. And I think that's the key thing, is there's no point in drawing up a lovely club plan if you don't act upon it and actually deliver upon it. So, I mean, that is a logical club planning pathway. So within that then, breaking down those steps, and we'll start at the bottom first. Looking at the red dot at the bottom, the first thing you have to do is really getting started, is getting buy-in. And again, I've done a lot of work with clubs, hurling, soccer, other clubs, and you go into clubs and they say, oh, we want to do a club plan, and then you go meet the club chairman and the club committee, and they say, actually, we don't, or you don't get the full buy-in. The important thing is to get the club buy-in and support from the leadership of the committee. And I think you get a good sense from that, well, is the committee working? Is there a number of people on the committee? Is it down to one person? Is it down to a very small group? And really what you need to look at is basically, is there somebody in the club who can take this leadership and drive it on? After that, then, we typically would say to a club, well, go off and gather the background information. Go off and look at your membership profile. Look how many athletes you have at juvenile level. What's transferring through to junior? What's transferring from junior through to senior? And look at those and see, are they telling you anything? What's the participation of male, female? Looking at key data like that is important, and there are templates out there for doing that. And some people at that point will also do a survey. Will actually go and actually talk to people in the club. They might actually do it in focus groups, or they might actually just hand out a sheet and say, what do you think? A lot of people would use this groundwork, in effect, to get people to buy into the idea of doing a club plan in the first place. The vision and strategy comes from the workshop and from a consultation exercise where if you don't have it set out, and a lot of clubs do have it set out, they know what they're trying to achieve. If you haven't got it set out, it's often a good exercise to pull people in and go, look, what are we here for? What are we trying to do? And I've gone into clubs, for example, that were primarily adult clubs, and they've looked at, well, can I expand to bring in juveniles, or how do we react to doing that? The next thing then is to actually pull the club plan together and basically begin to pull together the goals and the targets and the how. And sometimes this is where things begin to fall down. People set unrealistic targets, set unrealistic goals, and they really haven't got an idea how they're going to do it. And that makes the next stage very difficult, the stage of actually making it happen. And the important thing is that you do actually act on it. You do actually implement it, and you do actually have a system for reviewing it. So typically, and some people have said to me, how long does this take? if you have a quiet time, and I'm thinking, and the thing in athletics, there probably is no real quiet season, but if you have a quieter time where you can take 3 to 4 months, you could get a club plan together, a very simple club plan together over that kind of period of time. Then my feeling will be, once you actually put it out to the world and you publish it and tell people, look, this is what our club is, it does actually work really well. It gets a lot of good publicity, it gets people to buy into it, but also you should then look maybe to review it twice a year at your club committee level. The next stage brings on then to the club development model, and invariably when people go off and do an exercise looking at their strengths, their weaknesses, opportunities, and the challenges that they have, or the threats that they face, it comes back to one of 6 key areas. And this model will be very similar to other club development models in other sports. And at the core of it is always the athlete and the person who's participating. And it's focused both on the performance and the well-being of the athlete. So very much around the athlete at the center is the coach, okay, and is the coaching supports and what happens. So tied to the athlete performance and well-being is very much what the coach does or doesn't do. So we talk a lot about that. We'll come on and talk about each headings. But around that then, around the performance and well-being is the actual club structure. So in many cases, people will say, well, there's actually 3 arms to any sport. You've got the athlete, you've got the coach, and then you've got the club. And basically, this is basically around the club and how it runs. So stuff like facilities, finance, leadership, and engagement. And under each of these, you've probably got subheadings like facilities, obviously, place and equipment, finance, short-term and long-term development and sustainability. Engagement would obviously be stuff like your communications and PR and getting people to buy into the club. Leadership would include stuff like governance, management, administration, and then succession and culture. And a lot of people under a lot of those begin to talk about one particular topic, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. So, in a typical workshop setting in a county, you would then basically discuss each of the 6 points that I've referred to on the previous slide: the athlete performance, well-being, facilities, finance, leadership, and engagement. And we've done this in 3 counties now, where one of them was actually a joint county, where we did it in Cavan, Monaghan. And what we found that when we brought up the topics of these, the following topics were discussed. And I'd just be interested to hear people's or see people's views on these when we come to it. But the area of well-being, and these are the typical topics that are coming up. And what's not surprising probably, but is surprising in some way, that even across clubs and even across counties, much the same issues are beginning to arise or have arisen under the area of athlete well-being. So stuff like age-appropriate training and competition, upskilling coaches to be able to address that, welcoming and taking time with new members, developing a new mechanism for competition, stuff like end-of-season events and B championships. Number of coaches, and again, that ties to a point we're going to raise at the end. Engaging with parents, the whole transition of athletes. Again, these are all topics, and I remember doing this up in Cavan, Monaghan, and I'd done a workshop in another county shortly before where I had the notes from that county in my hand, and I was literally watching, be able to tick off, these are the exact same issues that are arising in this other county. So that basically, it just shows you the actual, I suppose, the consistency of issues. In the area of performance, the big issues that were arising was, again, the whole transition of athletes and retention of athletes, the whole engagement with parents and what's expected there, the whole area of, I suppose, a new Ireland and a different Ireland where multicultural participation. Coaching came up then, and the whole idea of having enough coaches and developing coaches, developing facilities, competing against other sports, and this came up further on as well. And all of these topics were common. So invariably, when you go to do your club plan, you're going to be looking at a number of these issues. And when you come back to a club plan, you're able to say, okay, we've got a problem with coaches. What do we do about it? Okay, we need to get X number to do assistant coach, X number to do level 1, X number to do level 2. Do we need to get people to level 3? You know, that kind of thing. So we need to basically factor that in as well. Around the area of performance and well-being are the other areas. And the first one of these was the facilities and finance. And this is the one, when you do a workshop, typically you could spend about an hour and a half discussing the whole athlete and the coaches, and you could keep talking all night about it, and probably talking to people here who would all have their own viewpoints on aspects of what I said there. But when it comes to facilities and finance, people tend to go a small bit quieter. And a lot of it ties back to who does it, how do we do it, how do we get there? They look at it as a huge challenge. How do we apply for funding? You know, and in fairness to Athletics Ireland, they provide a lot of support in the area of trying to secure, for example, sports capital grants on the recent call. And it's all recognising that people can do it bit by bit. I mean, I remember going to a GA club one time doing a plan, and they didn't have a pitch of their own, and their key goal was to get a pitch and build a stand inside 5 years. And we managed to pare it back to the point of, well, we'll buy some land inside the next 3 years and we'll work from there. And so that was kind of just an example of managing it bit by bit. A lot of people speak about the need to link to other clubs. That would have come up in quite a number of the counties. In the area of fundraising, a lot of the common issues came in there as well. And it was interesting enough that I remember in one of the counties, and this point came up, money is not always the issue. Invariably, quite a number of our clubs are very well off. They have a lot of money in the bank. They've done a lot of fundraising. And sometimes, and I've heard this from a couple of clubs, is what are we fundraising for? And, you know, you need to think about that as well. So that's just something to bear in mind. So under each of these headings, you look and say, well, what do we need to do? What targets can we set ourselves? How do we go about doing it? In the area of leadership and engagement, I think this is really important. And I think it comes down to really building a club community and balancing the day-to-day operations and with basically looking to the future as well. I think an awful lot of our clubs across all sports are literally operating, I won't say quite day to day, but probably month to month and year to year, season to season. And they're really trying to balance the strategic with the success, the need for immediate success. And this happens in a lot of sports where a club chairman is judged on how successful the club is, how many medals did it bring home this year in the National Senior Championships, for example. And that puts an awful lot of pressure. So it's really, I think the importance of club plans, you have to say, look, we're setting this out and we have a plan, and it's not a reactionary thing. Under the leadership, first of all, and the whole area of club management and administration, there is a need to recognise that the club is made up of many people, not just the athletes and the coaches. There's a whole swathe of people who can make up a club, who might never put their foot onto a track, but they could get involved in helping you in so many different ways. And I think it's very important that we look at trying to build that. Looking towards club members with key skills and strengths, looking for that person who's got those social media skills who can take over your PR account, for example. Looking for that guy who's a local quantity surveyor or architect. They might be able to do something for you on the whole building side or facilities development side. The key thing about retaining club members, recognising the whole social aspect of a club, the whole community aspect of a club, trying to basically have policies and procedures in so you can deal with situations if they do arise. And I know every club will have issues where they will have conflict. It's how you deal with it will allow your club to move forward or not. And always being seen to be open and welcoming. And I know there is challenges around that and being able to put in place the structures to ensure that you can be. Under engagement, and this is the central point that everything comes back to, is volunteers. How do we get volunteers? How do we attract, how do we retain volunteers? The whole idea of improving the whole PR, and you see the better clubs out there have great PR machines. You know, you look at them on Facebook, you look at them on Twitter, you look at them whatever social media platform, you look at how they engage with local radio, local papers, look how they engage with the parish newsletter. It just, you know, you spot these successful clubs a mile away, and they're very good at bringing in people to get involved in the club. What they put out is an image, well, we are successful, and by being successful and being organised and being, then that people will want to get involved, and that's a huge point. The whole area of retaining and recruiting volunteers, I believe, really comes back to 5 key areas, and I think it's really, the first thing is that we invariably frighten volunteers away. People are scared to get involved. The Irish are great though. They find it very hard to say no. That if you go up to somebody, shake their hand and say, listen, would you mind standing there and just, you know, rake the shot put pit for me, or the long jump pit for me? They'll probably say yes. The next day then they're measuring at the long jump, and suddenly we're helping to organise the event with you. You know, so bit by bit you build a relationship. I think it's about also setting out a defined role. There's nothing worse than roping somebody onto a committee, landing everything onto them, not telling them what the job is, and immediately the next chance to escape, they will. The other area of the whole volunteers is to show respect and to thank them for what they have done, to recognise what they have done, to give recognition. You know, the night that you give out club awards and have a social night, you recognise those people. Expect results. So people would laugh at me when I say this one. What do you mean expect results from volunteers? I think if you bring in somebody and you say to them, can you take on this job for me? Expect them to deliver on it and follow up with them. And I think people like to be delegated to if it's true delegation. And I think that's important that we do that one. So look, they're probably key points that I would have picked up when going through looking at the whole area of volunteering. In the area, so having looked at those areas, what happens next? I mean, what we typically have done in counties is actually held a county workshop where we brought in all the clubs, and the clubs would have sent in a number of delegates. Each club would send in a number of delegates, and what we do is we split them out amongst the different tables. You'd have a mix of old and young. In the good case of being where you've seen that mix of old and young, where you spot the guy who's been involved in the club for 40 years, sitting along the person who's in the club for the last 3 years. And what we do is we basically work through the common issues. And I think after that workshop, a lot of people realize, well, I am the same as the other club down the road. They have the exact same issues as me. And by recognizing that, they actually says, oh, geez, I'm not as badly off, or I can move forward with this one. We then basically say, look, using this tool, you can set out a club development roadmap. And what that would normally involve is moving on to actually some form of club open call where you say to clubs, look, do you want to do something in club planning? And I've gone out to quite a number of clubs where I've actually sat down with them and explained, this is how you might draw up a club plan. In those clubs that have taken it on, they've basically put together a little committee and a lead. In some cases, that's the club chairperson. In some cases, it's the vice chairperson. And they've taken on that lead. And they've basically then would move to a club workshop where they bring in the wider group of members and to pull together a plan. And the plan doesn't have to be a glossy, I said already. This could be a 2-page thing where under each of the headings that I've put out there, you're covering certain points, you're setting out certain targets. I'll show you a template of one now in a few minutes. What we're constantly trying to do with this club planning approach is to learn from it and to continue to refine it. I've gone off and done research on how associations have done it right through to smaller clubs, and it's continually being revised, looking at the whole pathway and the model. And I think the key thing is that, and I know that the AI are also looking at refining their club manuals, so I'm hoping that elements of what we've brought through here will come into that as well. So at the county workshop, what we typically do is we use it to help clubs identify the common challenges and opportunities in developing sustainable development plans. And I suppose we used it also to work out, is there a demand out there for a facilitated club planning program that would help them? And we obviously need to be able to manage that as well. What's key to it, and in a lot of cases, is the need for an experienced facilitator, somebody who can go into the club and actually help them. The role of the RDO in supporting that one. We've been very lucky, and I've been very lucky in the counties that I've gone to, is that I've had Pat Ryan and the RDOs with me. In fact, I think in a number of cases, I've had multiple RDOs working with me, so they're well familiar with this. We split club attendees across working groups, and the tables are provided with worksheets that they work. Is that at most of the workshops, I think we have 95% of clubs. You know, some of the counties we've been to, as I said already, Kilkenny, Cavan, and Laois, we had the vast majority of clubs. I think, like in Kilkenny, I think we were missing 1 club out of 11. I think in Cavan we nearly had everybody, and I think in Laois we nearly had all the clubs as well. And it was great to see that there was great consensus and a great recognition that common themes were emerging, and people began to say, yeah. And in a lot of cases, clubs also, or counties use that also to kind of kick on with county work as well. And we have seen now clubs begin to produce club plans. And that is a good thing. And I suppose that's ultimately what we want to see, is that people are beginning to plan and prepare, you know, to do that one. So I'll just give you an example of a club development program, just give you some of the headings that a typical club would have worked up. The club I've invented is a club called Rathgillybeg. If it bears any resemblance to any club out there, I apologise. It's not your club, I promise. So I suppose they went through the exact same process. They got a buy-in. The typical committee size that they assembled was a committee of 5. It was led by the vice chairperson of the club at the time. They'd identified their vision and strategy, but went off and did an exercise looking at what they did. This particular club actually, at the heart of what they were trying to do was about a community connection and being a community resource. They looked at that as well, alongside the whole provision of participatory and competitive athletics. They set out a club plan, and they're in the process of implementing, and they review that. Every year at their AGM, they actually present their actual club plan, where they are and how they're getting on against that one. And that has actually worked really well, because we're able to put up and say, well, in 2016, we had 2 level 1 coaches. By 2019, this particular club had moved to having 14 level 1 coaches. So you could see that development strategy. They put a strong focus after the club workshop on the whole area of coach development, which I just mentioned. They worked towards a defined training schedule aligned to competition. They were kind of drifting, and I suppose it came from almost lack of knowledge as well. They put a lot of effort, and this is probably a sign of the times, it's a few years ago, on the whole area of child safety and ensuring that they conform to the safeguarding requirements. They redeveloped the club committee and tried to put in a system whereby there was separation between club committee and coaches, so that the poor unfortunate club secretary wasn't also one of the leading coaches and wasn't also one of the top athletes. So they're basically trying to build there. Put a lot of effort into improving communications infrastructure and processes and how that happened. Recruiting volunteers. They're working towards trying to develop a dedicated winter training facility. And again, there's still work ongoing in that area. And they've actually fundraised quite a lot of money and got a lot of sponsorship. And actually what helped them when they were doing this particular aspect, the whole area of fundraising, was having a club plan. They were going to sponsors where they were looking for 4-figure sums and being able to say, we have a club plan. We know what we're going to do. You're not pumping your money into nothing. You know what I mean? So that was a very key thing that they did as well, and the benefit of having the club plan and having those few sheets to be able to present to potential sponsors. Under then, they basically broke it down, and this is the template that they would have worked to. I didn't put in the actual current target in the notes, because if I had, you probably would have identified who we are or who they were pretty quickly. Coaching, the number of athletes, they broke it down, and they basically set out then what the current was, what the target was, and under the notes they set out responsibility and timing and when this would happen. And the other thing was that the initial plan, and this was actually kind of surprising for a lot of people when I say it, was actually a 24-month to a 36-month plan. It was no longer than that. It didn't even go for 5 years, and it said, no, let's focus on the 2 to 3 year window. And that's what they've actually done. That plan has now evolved for a second time, and they're pushing on again to deal with that. So that gives you probably an idea of why you should do a club plan. So I think that probably covers what I wanted to say. I hope I haven't spoke too quickly and that you could understand my lovely flat Kilkenny accent. But if you had any questions for me, I'm happy to take them. Or if people wanted to feed in, I'm happy to take them as well. So Lillian.
Thank you, Dave. So thanks guys for tuning in so far. Like we said, normally we do get the opportunity to sit down with Dave himself and all meet in a room, but unfortunately we're meeting in a virtual room at the moment, but sure look, we're getting it done. Does anyone have any questions for Dave at the moment? Or any insights from their own clubs, any kind of perspectives that they feel that they could benefit from learning from, and don't be afraid to share, because Dave probably can come up with a solution for you. No pressure.
That's it. That's no pressure at all, anyone. Thanks very much.
So we have a chat here. 1 second now. We are muted. I know you're muted. Unfortunately, we have to keep everyone muted for a little while. But if you want to ask questions, you can do so in the chat box, and I will be able to pose the questions to Dave. I think we don't have any questions appearing just yet.
I'm after coming doing sharing, and suddenly I'm recognizing a whole lot of people that are on screen here in front of us.
So I have a question for you here, Dave. Do clubs use the plan development pathway to formulate the club plan?
Yes, and that's what people use as the broad template. So when they construct the actual club plan documents, they will use that as the main thing. And some people don't want it. Some people don't want to put in certain things into it, but invariably, yeah, it actually gives you a template for a document.
Perfect. We got another one here from Angus. He said, very good presentation, thanks. A lot of things here have to be considered in their own club. Our challenge has really been getting more people engaged to buy into planning and general. Any tips?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, Angus. I think, and this has actually worked really well. I haven't seen it as yet, or not hugely in athletics, but I've seen it a lot in GEA and in soccer. And what they've done is use the club planning and the club planning process as a way to bring in more people. So what they would have done is maybe gone to people and saying, look, have you got ideas around fundraising? You know, would you come in and maybe just give us some advice? And suddenly the person's at 3 or 4 meetings, and suddenly they're the person that's organizing the next fundraising event. You know, it's a way of doing that one. I think the critical thing here is bringing people in with specific tasks and broken down so that you don't frighten the life out of them. The worst thing you can have in a club, and I've learned this from experience, is having, as I said already, the club secretary who's also a coach, who's also the athlete. And, you know, I think that's the biggest risk you can run, is that there's too much. And so nobody will take a role off somebody because they go, I can never replace that person. And I think that's one of the big challenges. I think the questions have taken off there.
I know. No, quick. Just from Laura Bucky here in Tracton Athletic Club. I suppose she's just wondering: is there scope to run a club development workshop via Zoom, maybe for their own club?
Yeah, I'd be quite happy to do we're well able to do a brief around what the club plan is. But really, and again, this is probably the killer. Until you actually can get people back into a room, you won't get full benefit of it. But definitely you can do all the spade work around it. But I think there's a huge thing for bringing people into a local community hall and sitting down and going, why are we here? What are we going to do? How do we bring things forward? And that's where I've seen it working best.
Yeah, and again, another kind of a similar question. Richard was wondering when are the county workshop runs and how are they communicated? Usually, Richard, they're communicated via the Athletics Ireland website, on all social media platforms, and on the coaching fixtures, you'll usually find that the workshops are linked there. If you do have interest, any of you, I would recommend you contact your local regional development officer, because if there is interest, they would be more than happy to organise one for you. So the more voices out there, the better that there will be one. We had planned a lot of workshops to come up, but unfortunately, obviously, with everything that happened, they all had to be cancelled. But just bear in mind that probably when we do get all up and running, that it will probably be one of the first things that are prioritised by the development officers to run. But like I said, if you are interested or you think it could be a benefit to your region, I would notify your regional development officer to organise a local one for you. Another good question, and again, I think we all face this, Dave. A question from Peter. He said, coming up against one of the biggest GA clubs in the country is always a challenge. Any thoughts or advice about the challenges that poses? Sorry.
Yeah, that's a big question. And I've heard the two counters. I've heard both sides. One is work with them. The other one is try and compete against them. I don't think in some cases, it depends on how powerful that GA club is. I think there's a lot to be said for trying to work with them. I'm probably saying that because I have a GA connection, but I just think there's a lot to be said that if you can work with them, I think you. And I've seen clubs really struggling against GA clubs, where GA clubs almost will put training up against your training. You know what I mean? So I think it's a lot about trying to work with them and show the benefits of working for athletics. And it's been good to see some activities where you've seen athletics coaches working with clubs and working with GA clubs. I think, and again, this came up in one of the counties, an awful lot of the actual athletics clubs were actually using GA clubs as training facilities. And I think that's I think there's a sense of, you know, in the community, it again depends where they are, and depends on yours. It might be different in a big urban setting versus being in a rural setting like where I am in Kilkenny, or where we are in Kilkenny. And I think that's just one of the things. It's probably it's a multifaceted question, and depends on the circumstance. So
Of
I'd
course.
be indefinite there, Peter.
Okay, yeah, no, good advice. And I suppose it's just trying to work with them, or trying to find someone that you could potentially work with to maybe ease relationships a bit. We've another question here, and I say it's definitely relevant in a lot of clubs and counties. We have an issue with some long-standing committee members who are static in their participation. Any idea how we can re-engage or move them on politely?
Oh no, you're
Anonymous.
I think that's a big challenge. I think you have to give due recognition to those people, and that can be a challenge, you know. But I think it's about trying to work. Again, it's about people, and it's about having the right people on the committee who can work with these people. You can't force people out of a club. You can lead to club conflict, but I think you have to try and work with them. I think it's a case of taking jobs and working with them in trying to support them in different jobs, and bit by bit you begin to support. And it can be hard for people to let go, you know. And we've all seen that in different clubs. But I think it's not healthy that this comes back to the point of bringing in new volunteers. Unless people can see that the job is broken down, you'll never replace that long-standing committee member. That's just, if I was a club chairperson, what I'd be doing is probably, again, I'm looking at my own club chairperson who's on the discussion here. And again, when you've done this, is setting up committees and breaking it down and getting more people involved that way, and that's worked really well.
Thank you, Dave. We've another one here from someone. Do you have any tips for balancing getting feedback, engagement from a broad spectrum of members against getting too many ideas and views?
And this comes back to, and again, thanks Donald for that question. It's a good question. This comes back to the role of the workshop, that you hear the voices, but then you move on. So at the workshop, what you say is, we're going to focus on a number of areas. We're going to establish a couple of maybe subgroups, or allocate key responsibilities to people. So you make it clear you've heard what they've said, but then begin to pull it together. And I think a good facilitator or a good club plan leader within the club will be able to do that. I think that's the key point. I think you really have to go at the end of the workshop. We've heard your viewpoint. Now we're going to try and move that on. And at the end, then, if you do need to bring them back in and outline to them what you propose to do and how you're going to move that on. But you could spend, and again, I think what you're probably hinting at is you could spend years and years discussing what you want to do rather than actually not doing anything at all. It could be paralysis by conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Another question here, and I suppose it's actually probably coming up a lot more, thankfully, but it's in relation to juvenile and adult section and members of the club. Do you have any advice on separating or keeping together the juvenile and adult sections? We're a small 9-year-old club, originally juvenile, but now expanding adult section, although our juvenile numbers are reducing.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. A classic club development problem, where you start with a lot of enthusiastic parents and people who begin to work all the way through. You know, I think you need to have one club and try and retain one club. I think there's a lot to be said for having juvenile and adult sections within a club. It's good for juveniles to see adults competing and to see that progression pathway. It'd be good then ultimately that the adults will come back and probably act as coaches and bring back their kids in time. I think you need to keep the club together. I think you need to focus on developing and bringing through the next juvenile thing, but make sure that all parties are represented. And that's a case of managing the club committees and subcommittees and the responsibilities.
Thank you, Dave. Just another one about the GA. That crowd. No, I'm only joking. They're brilliant. But it was just about would it be a good idea if there was space for a track at a GA club? And yes, obviously that is brilliant. A lot of clubs, GA clubs and athletics clubs, have combined, I suppose, the history in itself. But just for those of you who may be new to it or are kind of curious about setting up their own or applying, should I say, for sports capital grants, you do increase your chances of getting funding if you combine with another like club, sports organization, or national governing body. So I I would bear that in mind. Use everyone as best as you can. It doesn't need to be an 8-lane tartan track. It could be a 3-lane, 4-lane, 120-meter strip around the side. But again, our club development and planning workshops and our sports capital grants, which our regional development officers run, can give you more access to information there on how to approach those funding applications. So another person asked, is it possible to get a copy of the presentation emailed to us, or even just the templates for the plan?
That at all, Lillian. If people want to send on their emails, I don't know, through yourself or through whoever, I'm happy to do that.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Hi guys, great presentation. Really enjoyed. Question on the club plan. How is it question on the club plan is, how defined do you set the goals and targets in the club plan, and how do you ensure accountability for reaching those targets?
Okay, well, obviously, again, anybody who's ever been involved in doing any kind of planning is to come back and look at the whole area of setting yourself very achievable goals and targets, being smart with them, being specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and targets. And they basically are set out, and you basically don't put out something that's not achievable. I think that comes back to a club committee and being realistic and look, what can we actually do over the next 24 to 36 months? I think it's pivotal that you do assign accountability, and you do put a date by which you want to break down certain things. So if you're going to try and get more coaches developed, you have to work within a certain timetable for that you're not suddenly going to go from having 0 level 1 coaches to 10 within a season, because they have to go through a development cycle themselves. You know what I mean? So that kind of thing would be the key thing. I think it's simple things. You could have under each of those headings one bullet point and say, we're going to focus on that, and that's all we're going to do. Or you could decide, well, we're going to ignore stuff like facilities because it's not applicable to us at this moment in time. We're going to focus on the performance and well-being and on the whole area of coaching. That could be something you could decide to do. It's really up to yourself. That's the beauty of this. You can pick and choose from that. You don't have to have a heading under each of those. Or you could just say, yeah, we are going to focus on facilities, and that's our plan for the next couple of years. And when you see what some of the clubs have done, that's what they've done, and done it really, really well. Yeah.
Myself there, apologies. I suppose just when you were sending out the presentation, Davey, to ourselves, and we're sharing it with everyone involved, do you have a sample or a survey template for feedback from members of a club?
Yeah, I can get one. I can get one from. I don't have one for Athletics Club, but I have one for other clubs that I can give you a kind of. It broadly aligns to what we've discussed tonight. Probably narrow down. Again, you will need to tailor for your club depending on what you're trying to do, or what you want to look at.
Perfect, thank you. Excellent presentation, and well done to David and AI. Oh, thanks very much, guys. We're very happy with that.
Guys.
We're very happy with Dave. Let me have a look here. Their great presentation again, David. Feedback from recent workshop in Monaghan was excellent, with 9 clubs now working on a club plan. So that's actually from our regional development officer Dermot Granahan up in Donegal. He's doing great work up there as well. So he's obviously seen the hard work that is being done on the ground. So again, he's going to be a good advocate for everything that's being done. But it might, like I said, it definitely would be something to consider to liaise with your local development officer.
Yeah, no, it's great to see Dermot doing that, and the mix of Cavan and Monaghan in the room that night, and the mix of people who have been involved with the club for a long time and people who are brand new to the club. It's great to see. That was a good long night. I think I got up there about 6 and I got out there sometime after midnight, so it was a great night, and thanks to Dermot for making that one happen. It was really good.
Brilliant. Again, very helpful and informative presentation, David. Thank you from all of Fingalians AC. Great news, David, about the template, as this will be very useful to tailor our club. Again, another thank you and another well done. I think, Dave, that is our questions. Oh, we have to bring you up to Dublin. That's an invitation from Pat Hooper. I hope you get to I hope you get to a nice bar after, but no, that's, I think, all our questions. We just down to Dublin. Great presentation again, and everyone is quite happy at the moment, Dave. So thank you very much for
That's
everything.
great, guys.
Guys, it's been fantastic, and thank you all for tuning in. Again, it's one of our probably most popular webinars, and it's great to see the interest in it, because like you said, if we have more demand and interest here, it actually allows us to plan more strategically going forward to get more of your clubs and counties involved. So like I said, don't be shy about contacting a regional development officer, and they'd be more than happy to oblige and facilitate you in any way that they can. So if you are looking for their details, they can all be accessed on the Athletics Ireland website, and they'll be able to support you in any way that you're looking for.
Thanks all.
So guys, I think that's everything at the moment. Thanks again, like I said, for tuning in. Thank you to Dave. I hope you got all your questions answered. But if anyone does have any further questions, you can direct them to us in Athletics Ireland, to either myself or any of the regional development officers, and we can talk to Dave then if there's anything specific. But thank you guys for joining in, and we'll leave you in peace.
Good night, lads.
Thanks guys. Thanks Dave.